Day of the Departed takes its place as one of the more controversial releases from the Ninjago catalogue, and whilst I do understand the complaints about it, I don't exactly agree with them. And this is not me trying to be a contrarian by any accounts. The thing is that when Day of the Departed released 9 years ago, I'm old. Oh no. Right, anyways, when Day of the Departed released 9 years ago, I honestly didn't even see the criticisms back then. The thing is that I've always enjoyed this special, and for this video, I just simply want to defend it, because I think there's some amazing moments in this special, and I will acknowledge the problems that people have, or at the very least the main problems that people have, and just kind of give my take on it, because to an extent, I don't really agree with them, and I want to prove to you that Day of the Departed is better than you actually remember. So for this video, sit back, relax, and let's talk about Day of the Departed. And I hope, if anything, this will encourage you to go and rewatch it like I have for this video and like I will on Halloween itself. It's a little tradition of mine, and it'll be interesting to know if anyone shares it with me. But let me not waste any more of your time, and let's talk about Day of the Departed. Now, for the newer fans who may have not seen Day of the Departed, for one, you should go and watch it, but for two, the official synopsis of the special is, when Cole returns to Yang's haunted temple to seek revenge on the former Air-Jitsu master who turned him into a ghost, he accidentally uses a powerful dark magic blade that unleashes the spectral forms of Ninjago's greatest villains, and he traps himself within the temple. While Cole battles for his freedom, the ninja must return their ghostly foes to the departed realm before they gain the power to remain in Ninjago forever. It is quite simple to the point. The ninja have to battle their former foes, and honestly, I really do like that plot. It's quite simple in its overall nature, and I do think it is very fitting for a Halloween special. And I think the thing that not a lot of people acknowledge is the fact that it's fairly consequence-free. Of course, in the long run of the plot, which I'll get into later, there are some very good things in terms of the consequences, but at the same time, the whole concept of the villains returning isn't actually too much of a consequence. The thing is that they were able to return without actually affecting what happened to them in the seasons prior. They weren't bringing back their former bodies, they weren't reversing what actually happened to them in any way. The thing is that by all accounts, those spirits were just pulled from the departed realm. And of course, there could have been consequences if they succeeded in their plan, but the fact is that they were able to bring back these amazing villains just to not much of any sort of consequence. But this is where one of the first main criticisms of Day of the Departed does come in. A lot of people believe that these villains were honestly wasted in this instance. A lot of people think there should have been a lot more time given to them, a lot more time to flesh them out. And I'm gonna be perfectly honest with you, I fundamentally disagree with this. The thing a lot of people don't take into account is the fact that the villains were used by Yang essentially as pawns to his own game. They were meant to serve as distractions for the ninja, and the ninja ultimately were taken to that distraction. They were completely taken aback by the fact that their old villains returned, and the villains were just set out on one thing: defeat the ninja. The thing is that I just don't necessarily know what they could have done with the villains that isn't what they did in the special itself. Remember, the villains were ultimately having until the end of the night to be able to take their place among the living once more. There wasn't really space for much outside of an initial fight that wouldn't have just padded things out and really would have just tried to make things look a lot longer than they actually were. I think honestly, the only scenario where you could have extended out all of the other villains is just simply by not making them do what they were set out to do. And that's why I just simply disagree with this idea that the villains were wasted. I think honestly the villains were pretty good for what it was worth. I think they set out what they were meant to do, and ultimately yes, they were defeated, and you can debate on how they were defeated, but the thing is that I just don't think there's much of a problem with it. And I just don't think the special wanted to do much more with it, because it wasn't the point of the special. But again, more on that later. And I'm gonna be honest, I'm even gonna argue that the small time that the villains did get was honestly pretty good, especially when it did come to their eventual defeat. The thing is that their end in Day of the Departed mirrors their respective fates from their own seasons. Samukai was almost victorious, but he eventually did get overwhelmed. In the pilot, it was him picking up all of the golden weapons, whereas in Day of the Departed, it was when Ronan came in and gave backup to Jay. Kozu's end was off-screen, but it was heavily implied. In Season 2, it was him basically just being taken out, presumably by Nia's cannon, just before Lloyd destroyed the Overlord. And then, in this instance, it was Dareth turning the Stone Army against him, and them taking care of him accordingly. Again, a very nice mirror. Cryptor's end was kind of inadvertent. It was unintentional to an extent, but was also intentional at the exact same time. The first time was him being frozen over by Zane's ice and then shattering into pieces. But in Day of the Departed, it was the fact that he fell out of a tree. Chen almost succeeded in his plan and basically had the upper hand, but the tables turned on him in the very last moment and he ended up succumbing to his own fate. In the first instance, it was the fact that the ghosts of these Anachondrite generals came back and cursed him to the Curse Realm, whereas in this instance, it was the fact that Nia turned a missile against him and it hit him instead of them. Moro simply accepted his fate. In Season 5, when the Preeminent latched onto him, he accepted his ultimate demise and he went into the ocean accordingly. Whereas this one, he helped out Wu and the ninja and he returned to where his statue initially stood and he let his soul go. Again, pretty nice. And ultimately speaking, Pythor never met his end, and he ultimately just slips away. First was the fact that when the Great Devourer was destroyed, clearly Pythor escaped and just slipped off, and in this instance, he jumped off of the statue and left accordingly. And again, the last proof that they all mirrored one another. So yes, I understand the whole point of, well, the villains weren't really used too much, and the villains could have ultimately done more, but the thing is that I just don't necessarily think they needed to. I think ultimately speaking, the time that they got was fine, they all got a decent little fight scene, maybe except Kozu, but the thing is that ultimately speaking, they all had their moments, they all served their purpose, and that is basically it. I just don't think that they could have done 4 or 10 episodes with these respective villains. I think they were just simply there just as a part of the overall story and ultimately pawns to Yang's game. The other fairly major aspect to the plot that I do want to talk about, apart from the main aspect that I want to save till the end, which spoiler alert is Yang and Cole, the other thing for me I want to talk about is just the remainder of the characters, which for the most part is the ninja. A lot of people have also cited that Day of the Departed isn't too good because a lot of the ninja don't really get much time, and again, I just disagree with this. I have seen a lot of people comment on the fact that the ninja should have had more within Day of the Departed. They should have had more moments, they should have had more dialogue, they should have had more scenes. And whilst I do understand that point, I also disagree because simply put, Day of the Departed isn't the story for them. The thing is that, and I've discussed this a lot in different seasons, the ninja don't need plot-altering, life-altering decisions by every single season. Of course, if a character has gone a very long time without it, I would understand that point. But the thing is that for the most part, most of the ninja had a lot of development by the point of Day of the Departed. And at the time, a lot of people said the exact thing of, Cole needed a season, Cole needed something. And this was the opportunity for Cole to have that. And again, it's not even the case of the ninja have nothing. In similar vein to the villains, the whole point of the plot is that the ninja were distracted. All the ninja had their respective villains to take care of. All of them had some sort of history, some sort of interaction with the other, and I do think they were all interesting to scenes to have. Regardless of how you spin it, the very little time that we may have had with the ninja and their respective villain was utilized very well, and we had a lot of really good interactions from it. Pythor and Lloyd had some amazing dialogue between the two of them, and it was really interesting to see. Chen, Nia and Kai also had some amazing conversations, Cryptor and Zane was really interesting to witness, and Moro and Wu by far have some of the best interactions we've ever seen between two characters. I think honestly, even though you could say that they didn't have too much, I think they did honestly get enough. And again, it goes back into this idea of, well, what if they had more episodes to really expand on this? And again, I really want to make the point of, I don't think they could have done much more. When I think of expanding Day of the Departed into 4 episodes, I really don't know what you could do with that time. And I think, honestly, the little time they do have makes honest sense. The thing is that it's meant to feel like a distraction, it's meant to feel quick, it's meant to feel sudden, and it's meant to not last all that long. Because the point is that the ninja get distracted, they overcome the distraction, and they immediately try to come to Cole's aid. The fact is that they serve the purpose that they were meant to serve. This honestly is what might land me in a bit of hate, but the thing is that I just simply believe the ninja didn't need any more. I think a lot of people don't realize that it was meant to be the Cole story. I think anyone from the time will tell you the exact same thing of, Cole needed this. And again, I'll get into Cole later, I really do think they took advantage of Cole when it does come to the special. The last character, or I guess plot point, I want to discuss for this video that isn't the main two characters is the case of the introduction of Crux. The thing is that Crux was introduced the season before he actually became the villain, and I do think that was very interesting to actually see because it's not something you got, especially during that time for Ninjago. It's interesting because we were introduced to this character that was just very eccentric. He was very kind-hearted. He was just this museum guide, this owner of the museum. I don't exactly know what he even did at that museum. But the thing is that he was just this very cheerful and helpful guy. And it was really interesting to see, even though it was just a facade. Of course, there were already theories that he was going to become the next villain. The thing is that we understood that the next season was going to relate to time, and people understood, or at least theorized, that it was going to be Crux simply because he had a pocket watch. And I do think that is really funny in retrospect, but the thing is that it was right, so who am I to complain about the method because they got the right execution? It's just really interesting because outside of the theorizing, they did by all account introduce a character with no indication that they were going to be anything more. And I do think that is something that Day of the Departed should get more credit for. Because, of course, whilst we have had instances where villains are getting teased, say, a season or two beforehand, the main one I can think of really is Morrow, the thing is that it's just not exactly common to see. And not to this extent. Because when I think of the Morrow example, he was just teased at the very end. Whereas Dr. Saunders was in there for most of the special, so you have to give it credit for the fact that it did something that we don't really get to see within Ninjago anymore. But honestly, to summarize these plot points I've talked about currently, I really do think that people give it a lot more hate than it honestly deserves. I think the whole idea that the villains and the ninja were either underutilized or just straight up rushed, I do feel like it's honestly a bit of a disservice. Because, like I said, considering what this special is meant to be about, I really do think they took advantage of the time. I honestly remember a lot of the interactions, and a lot of what the ninja and the villains did really did feel memorable to me. I will always remember Morrow standing down and turning his weapon to Wu. I will always remember Nia and Kai realizing that Chen has returned. I will always remember the whole interaction between Lloyd and Pythor. It was honestly fantastic and definitely has a lot of credit that it needs to deserve, because it has some fantastic moments, and I hope people do acknowledge that. But before I do get into Cole and Yang specifically, there is two things I want to talk about in particular, and the first one is the animation, because I honestly have always acknowledged Day of the Departed as sitting in this very weird realm when it does come to its animation. Of course, this was animated by WillFilm, and shout out to the goats, and I'm very sad to see that the company no longer exists. But the thing is that Day of the Departed doesn't really get acknowledged for the fact that it's very much in this really weird transitionary period between Season 6 and Season 7. In terms of the WillFilm animation, I do think it honestly peaked at Season 6. Season 6, in my opinion, is the best Ninjago looked between Season 1 and Season 7, or more specifically the classic period. The thing is that a lot of people note how bad the Season 7 animation looks, and in my opinion, I do agree with it for the most part. In my opinion, I've always taken into account that it just looks like it just missed one final render. It was just missing a few maybe little layers, a little tidbits here and there. But the thing is that it definitely had a bit of a downgrade, especially in comparison to Season 6. But Day of the Departed sits in this really weird realm to me. The thing is that it has a lot of that Season 7 jank, but at the same time, it still looks decent at the exact same time. It doesn't look like it was missing layers or renders by any account, but it still has that Season 7 flair, and it's really interesting to me. One of the biggest things about Season 7's animation to me is that the ninja look almost glossy. They look a lot more plastic than they originally look. But the thing is that at the same time, Day of the Departed does have it, but not as bad. The main place you can see this is actually with Jay's hair. Jay's hair in Season 7 becomes extremely glossy. Looks honestly completely different to what we've seen beforehand, especially when you realize that there were times when his hair was completely matte. But the thing is that Jay's hair still has that gloss in Day of the Departed, which is really interesting to actually see. Day of the Departed also has that really weird flat looking Spinjitzu. I don't really know how else to put it. For some reason, since Nia was able to learn Spinjitzu in that era of the show, for some reason I do think the Spinjitzu looked very different. Lloyd's effects looked really off, all the ninjas' effects just looked a lot more flat. It really did feel like Spinjitzu took a major downgrade. But the thing is, like I said, it started in Day of the Departed. And the last thing that I really wanted to point out is that it has the really weird Hand of Time weapon syndrome that I have dubbed it. If you look at Season 7, you will note that the ninja's weapons appear out of thin air. Swords, scythes, everything just appears out of nothing. Of course you can justify it, say, for nunchucks or shurikens, but when you think in Season 7 where Cole has that massive scythe that comes out of nowhere, that just gets completely pulled out of thin air. And a lot of people do acknowledge that as a problem with Season 7. But again, it happens in Day of the Departed. There are some attempts to actually give the weapons a space for them to actually be. The main one I do think about is that when Kai and Nia were first found by Chen, the thing is that Kai runs back into the blacksmith shop and actually retrieves a sword for him and Nia. I really appreciate that detail. It was completely unnecessary, but they still went out of their way to do it, and I do really like it for that fact. And the other thing I think of is the fact that throughout Cole's fight in the Temple of Air Jitsu, whenever he does get another sword, some nunchucks, or even a staff, you do actually see him putting the weapons on his back and taking them back out accordingly. They do actually give the weapons some space, and I actually really appreciate those details. But those are honestly the only instances where they actually do it. The thing is that there's just plenty more instances where they do what they do in Hands of Time. Lloyd, when he begins his fight with Pythor, randomly gets a sword. Lloyd, Kai, and Nia all randomly pull out swords from thin air when Moro turns up. The thing is that there are plenty of moments where they just simply didn't have the weapons and then they suddenly did. Another fairly major one I just thought of, when Cole first gets to the Temple of Air Jitsu, he very clearly doesn't have the Ying Blade. However, he just randomly acquires it out of nowhere. It's really weird to actually see this be the case, but it is, and I just don't really understand why. The main theory I have as to why this was the case is just simply down to the fact that we do know the Day of the Departed and Hands of Time were fairly rushed. The thing is that we do know the Day of the Departed came out in response to the fact that the movie was set back by a year, so to an extent that they did have to rush it. And Season 7 I just think was a really weird production cycle in general, but the thing is that there were very clearly some sort of growing pains, especially during the production of these seasons. And I don't think it's purely down to the movie, I just think it was just down to a really weird transitionary period. But I don't want to harp on the animation much more than that. I could point out the multiple errors that there were, but the thing is that I just feel like it wasn't really something I wanted to talk about. I feel like it's just ragging on something that has already been ragged on before. So I'm going to talk about the other thing before I get into the main point. And it's honestly something that I have a lot of praise for as well, which is the soundtrack. We had 3 new pieces of music for Day of the Departed. We had the song Day of the Departed by The Fold, we had the Rift Whip by The Fold, and we had the soundtrack for Day of the Departed that was dubbed just Maybe I'm Departed by Michael Kramer. And all 3 of them are some of the best we've ever had from Ninjago. My least favourite of the 3 is just the song Day of the Departed, and that is quite literally me just picking the least of my favourites. I still absolutely love this song. It's very rock inspired, it has a very good beat to it, I really enjoy the vocals as well. It is a fantastic song. I'm by no means a music expert, I want to clarify that now, but I have to say, the song just feels really good and it's definitely a fantastic listen. The second place for me was definitely the Rift Whip. I think most of the whips are really good. I definitely have some in particular that I do like, but the Rift Whip is by far one of my top 3 or maybe even top 5 depending. The thing is that it's such a good interpretation of the song and definitely a fantastic utilization of the theme of Day of the Departed. It definitely has a lot going for it and I can't help but absolutely adore what they did do with the riff. But by far the best one of the bunch to me is the soundtrack Maybe I'm Departed by Michael Kramer. I'm honestly fairly certain this thing should be illegal because it's that raw. This is by far one of my favourite soundtracks in all of Ninjago. It is such a well put together piece, it very much reflects Cole, it very much reflects where the ninja are at, it very much has that theme, that feel and that tone that I just absolutely adore. If you have somehow not listened to this soundtrack, you absolutely need to. The thing is that this just captures everything that you want within a Ninjago soundtrack. It fills me with such a warm feeling and such a nice feeling, and I can't really explain it other than that. Honestly, Michael Kramer, if you are somehow watching this, hats off to you, my friend. I would love to discuss these with you, because this is by far only one of such an amazing library that you have produced. And I'm going to be honest, it is possibly my favourite one for that exact reason. Like I said, I am by no means a music expert by any account, and I'm really not doing enough justice to these soundtracks. So I'm going to keep this section a lot more brief and just simply say, go and listen to these soundtracks. Go and listen to the riff. Go listen to all of it, because they are so good, and I really can't put words to how good it truly is. I just need you to trust me on this one. But yeah, the soundtrack, absolutely amazing. But this leads me to the final two characters that I did want to discuss in defense of Day of the Departed. And honestly, I really do feel like whilst they do get credit, I really don't think they get enough. And like I said, it is of course Yang and Cole. So let me start with Yang. In my opinion, simply dubbing Yang as just another Ninjago villain is a bit of a disservice to Yang. The thing is that he just never really intended on doing anything that would have been in line with any of the other villains that we've ever seen. Of course, you can argue him releasing the former villains is a villainous act, and for that reason I would agree. But the thing is that Yang's intentions is never to take over Ninjago, it's never to destroy Ninjago, it's never to make Ninjago in his own image. Yang, by all accounts, was simply just afraid of being forgotten. He attempted immortality as a result and ultimately failed, and all he wanted because of it was just to simply come back to life. That's not the behavior, in my opinion, of a villain. That is just not simply anything that would actually be the case when it does come to what we especially have seen beforehand. Remember, this is the villain that we saw after Narukon, a villain that quite literally terraformed Ninjago into his own image. If you put Narukon next to Yang, I would not consider them anywhere near in the same bracket whatsoever. Yang explains the fact that he just simply wants to be remembered for what he was, and of course, haha, the writers forgot about Air-Jitsu not long after this, so by all account Yang was forgotten as well. But the thing is that it's just, in context of the universe, Yang just didn't really want to meet that fate, and I personally do believe that in context of the universe, Cole in particular never forgot Yang. I just think it was very interesting and a very different take for a Ninjago villain, especially at that point. Remember, before now, every single villain only ever wanted to take over or destroy Ninjago, whereas Yang just simply didn't, and it's very much reflected in his actions across the course of the special. Yang was simply just focused on his own mission. He needed Cole to bring him the Ying Blade because he was never able to actually get it. And I understand that motivation entirely. But as soon as he does get the blade from Cole, Yang by all accounts could have taken care of Cole then and there. But the thing is that he just simply doesn't. He just bounds Cole to the temple and just tells his students to keep an eye on him. And even when Cole escapes, Yang never actually fights Cole until absolutely necessary. Yang actively goes out of his way to avoid the fight with Cole and only fights Cole when it's absolutely necessary and he had no one else to actually get in his way. The thing is that for the most part, Yang just tells his students to distract him, or more specifically just fight until he gets his mission done. And you could see that as a villainous act, but the thing is that it's more just a distraction, because Yang also knows that his students would never have been able to actually take Cole out, because they are all ghosts. Remember, they're all just using katanas, nunchucks, staffs. They're not actually using any sort of weapon that would be able to stop a ghost. Remember, they would have required water. And I feel like if Yang simply wanted Cole taken care of, he would have just provided water in some way, shape, or form. Of course, he is also vulnerable to water, but that doesn't mean that Yang wouldn't have had access to it at the exact same time. So I do find it fairly interesting to note that by all accounts, Yang just simply never wanted Cole to be stopped. He just wanted to delay Cole so he could just do his own mission. And for that, I really do find it interesting, because Yang just simply doesn't act like a villain, and I feel like that is just so fascinating to see. Again, I'm going to take one of the main criticisms of Yang and take it into account. A lot of people note the fact that Yang was the villain for 40 minutes and then he never really gets acknowledged again. And I understand that point wholeheartedly, but in those 40 minutes, his plot is done. Of course, you could argue that they could have done more with Yang, they could have had scenes with Cole and Yang interaction in Season 7, but the thing is that in Season 7, for one, there's a lot more plot in the way of that, and I feel like it would have just been too messy, but the other thing is that when Yang accepts his ultimate fate, and he accepts the fact that he is going to be Keeper of the House, and he accepts that he isn't going to be forgotten, that's really it. There's not really much more you can do with Yang that wouldn't just be needlessly padding out his character. And that is where I think a lot of people just simply got Yang wrong. I think people just don't really acknowledge the fact that Yang, by all accounts, didn't want to be the villain. Yang, by all accounts, didn't want to hurt Cole. He didn't really want to do any of that. Like I said, he just simply binds Cole to cuffs. That's all he does. By all accounts, him or his students could have taken him out there and then. But he simply doesn't, and I feel like that is a detail that not a lot of people take into account, and it's in my opinion why Yang is one of the most interesting villains we've ever had in Ninjago. But to move on to the main point of Day of the Departed, Cole. Honestly, this special does a lot for the character of Cole, and there are so many details within Day of the Departed that I think are some of the best we've ever had within the show, and they definitely do deserve that credit. The main plot point when it does come to Cole in Day of the Departed is the fact that he believes that he is fading away, he believes that he is being forgotten, and he believes that he will cease to become. It is, by all accounts, extremely depressing, because this plot is literally just Cole believing that he is no longer gonna be, he is no longer going to exist, and the fact is that he's gonna be forgotten. It does mirror Yang in a lot of ways, but in my opinion, the Cole one is just a lot more depressing. We have seen firsthand that Cole has been battling with the fact that he has been a ghost for a very long time now, and we have seen that Cole has been definitely struggling with it. Initially speaking, he is depressed about the fact he's a ghost. He initially does get a boost of morale from the rest of the ninja, but for the most part, you could very clearly see that he was coping, and Season 6 does prove that this was the build-up. Cole in Season 6 makes a lot of ghost-related jokes, and the ninja even note the fact that he is making a lot of jokes about being a ghost. But the thing is that it sounds like he was coping with the fact that that was the situation that he was in. The thing is that if you acknowledge it in the sense of he's making jokes to fight the pain, you realize that Cole was probably making those comments just as a way to lighten things up, when in reality, he was just secretly still depressed about what the situation was. And it culminates in the fact that in Day of the Departed, that nightmare is coming to be. He is being forgotten, he is becoming departed, and he acts accordingly in the only way that he knows how. He sees a potential opportunity to at the very least take revenge for what happened, as he believes that that is officially it. But the thing is that through all of that anger, you get some very depressing scenes. Whilst he is extremely angry and he's on this mission for revenge, the thing is that you do get this one scene that in my opinion perfectly demonstrates the fact that Cole was just simply not in a good place and he just didn't know what to do about it. And it's the scene where he's on the way to the temple itself. As he's driving along, he hears his father singing a song. Plain and simple, Day of the Departed, he was meant to go and see his father to light a lantern, presumably for his mother, but he doesn't show up, and in reaction, Liu just sings a song that is dedicated by all accounts to Cole, and Cole hears it. Honestly, it is one of the most interesting scenes we've ever seen, because it not only proves that Cole is so connected to the people around him, he really does believe that he's no longer going to see his own father again. And in my opinion, it is completely amplified by the scene where Liu's lyrics goes, "Put music in your heart, and now my heart is gone." And it cuts back to Cole in his anger, and he has a moment where he becomes sad once more, but he shakes it off because he knows the mission that he needs to go on. But in his mind, he hears his father say that his heart is gone. And it's not his actual heart that he's referencing here, he's referencing Cole. And it is, by far, one of the most emotional scenes we've potentially ever had in Ninjago. In similar vein to what I said about the soundtracks, I would recommend over anything you go back and just listen to the song of the blacksmith singing. The thing is that moment honestly doesn't feel like it belongs in Ninjago. The emotion and the pure tone of that scene is so unbelievably potent, and I can't believe that it's in something that people consider to be a bad special. In my opinion, it is one of the most important scenes in all of Day of the Departed, and it perfectly demonstrates Cole in a lot of different ways. He has the anger, he has his mission, but he doesn't want to be on it. But he went on that mission knowing he wasn't coming back. And that, in my opinion, is only one of 3 scenes that honestly really amplify the state of Cole. That was the first one that really showed a lot to me. The second one is towards the end of the fight with Yang's students. Cole is beyond exhausted, but he knows he needs to continue on his mission, if anything, to stop Yang. And the thing is that he says to himself, one last time, again amplifying the fact that he thought that this is by all accounts a mission that he wasn't going to come back from, but he does spinjitzu, and his spinjitzu looks notably different. His spinjitzu has a ghostly tone to it. It is the only time we've ever seen his spinjitzu in this way. It never looks like this in any other moment, and a lot of people to this day have debated on what that actually means, and I think it honestly comes down to one of 2 factors. Of course, a factor is the fact he's departing, and I do think it would reflect in his Spinjitzu, but I do think the other factor is the fact that Cole was just simply tired. Cole was coming to his end. Cole was becoming towards what he thought was the end of his own life, and the Spinjitzu was the last manifestation of the energy that he did have, and you can hear that in his voice. When he says the words "Ninja Go," he doesn't say it in the usual confident enthusiasm that he actually has. There is strain in his voice, he could barely actually get the words out. He is tired, he is exhausted, it was the last thing that he could do. And once he finished that Spinjitzu tornado, and he finished off his students and he went up to Yang, again you can hear it in his voice. He says, "Stop it, Yang," but you can hear that his voice is completely welted. His voice is gone. He has nothing left in him, but he knows he needs to find something to finish off what he thought was his last moments of life. It is again by all account depressing. It shows Cole completely pushed to his absolute limits. It shows Cole in a state that we never really would have expected from a kid's show, and in my opinion, a state that we've never seen any of the other ninja in to this very day. Cole is by all account the most exhausted, the most at the end of his life we have ever seen anyone within this show, and I absolutely love it. Not love it in the sense of, oh, this is such a great scene, I love to see this so much. It's great in the fact that it really did amplify everything about Cole in that moment. It amplified the fact that even though he was ready to be done, he was ready to no longer be, he still continued on knowing that he needed to finish what he accomplished. And even though he may not see the results of his mission, he knew that he would have saved Ninjago one more time because he believed that Yang was ultimately there for the wrong reason. And honestly, I just adore this scene so much. This did actually then extend into the scene where Cole by all account listens to Yang and he understands Yang's perspective and he tries to help him, and that again really does amplify the point of Cole. But that is not the theme I want to talk about when it does come to his character in that moment. If you do want a Cole analysis, I do have one on my channel. But the thing is that the last scene that really did amplify the utter depression that Cole was in was the moment he actually did become human. When Cole becomes human and he goes back to the ninja, of course they're all celebrating the fact that he is no longer a ghost. And there is a scene in this moment that really did show the end result of Cole's multi-season arc where he was battling with depression over being a ghost. And it's the moment he speaks with Nia. In Season 5, where Cole by all account was ready to give up, we get to see a scene where Nia encourages him to get back on his feet and becomes the Earth Ninja that they all know and love. The thing is that Cole was just ready to no longer be a ninja by that moment, and Nia is the reason he did become it once more. So in Day of the Departed, when Nia runs up to him and says, "You look as good as new," and Cole says, "Well, pretty much, thank you, Nia," I do think that has a very second meaning and it calls back to that moment. It's a very subtle detail, but I do believe that Cole was saying thank you to Nia because she's the reason he was able to do it all to begin with. If Nia didn't help him in Season 5, Cole may have never become human once more. Nia is the reason that all happened, and Cole's subtle acknowledgement without saying anything further on it is honestly really cool to see, and such a subtle detail that I absolutely adore. It is the third of the scenes that shows the progression of Cole's mentality. Initially speaking, he's depressed. He is angry, but he is depressed at the fact that he knows he may never see his friends and family again. Then we get to see him at his utmost limits. We get to see him pushed to the very brink. And at the end, we get to see him happy once more. And in my opinion, in a 40-minute span, being able to go through all of those emotions is absolutely fantastic and deserves that credit. Because Cole had so much in that instance, and that is why I forgive the fact that the other ninja and the villains didn't get too much at the same time. Because Cole got so much in such a small amount of time and got so much appreciation, and I really can't acknowledge how much I love this any more than I have. It is one of the reasons I love Cole, because in such a small amount of time, we got to see so much from that character. And he is, like I said, the reason why he's my favourite. It does just go to show that even though one of the main points about Day of the Departed is that it's simply too short, you can do something with that time, and you can do something meaningful with that time. And like I said, it is the reason why Day of the Departed deserves more love than it does get. Because even though these are some very valid criticisms, and I do understand the point, I do think when you look at it from a different perspective, you can truly appreciate something that really did do a lot, especially considering what it had to go for. But with all of that on an overall, I really do believe Day of the Departed deserves more love. I really do think it did a lot for the time, and I definitely do think it deserves all of the praise that I have given it today. Of course, valid criticism. Nothing in Ninjago is completely perfect, and I do acknowledge the faults that it does have. But the thing is that I really do feel like people don't take into account all the good that it does have within that short time span. And if you haven't given it a chance, or if you haven't watched it in a very long time, I thoroughly recommend you do go back to Day of the Departed and give it a good look, because I really do see so much potential and so much greatness within those 44 minutes. And it is, in my opinion, one of the best things we've ever gotten from Ninjago for a lot of different reasons. Of course, I'm not saying it's above Season 8 or Dragons Rising, but what I am saying is that it is truly something that needs to be appreciated more, because looking at it from this analytical perspective has definitely made it so much better in my own personal ranking, and I hope I have proven to you that it does deserve a second chance. Because I didn't even cover absolutely everything for Day of the Departed, but as far as I'm aware, this video is already too long as it is. So, if you guys do want me to analyze Day of the Departed anymore, I would be more than happy to do so. But I do want to know one more thing from you guys apart from that. Do you like Day of the Departed? Do you appreciate what it did? Do you have more criticism for it that I haven't mentioned? I would love to know how you feel about the special, because I truly do want to stand by the fact that this is a good piece of Ninjago media and it's simply just being slept on. But with that, thank you very much for watching the video, and I do hope you enjoyed it. And if you did enjoy it, please consider subscribing. I love having more people to discuss Ninjago with. And if you do want to support the channel further, which you don't have to, consider becoming a channel member and joining the Eternal Legends. Join the likes of World of Cards Entertainment and Grandmaster Sensei 28208. Thank you very much both. But that is about it for today, you guys, and thank you very much for watching. Take care. Okay,